Lesson 35, R1C1 style formulas. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the easier to enter formulas using something called R1C1 style. The great thing about R1C1 is that we use the exact same formula throughout the data set. We're going to talk about how to understand R1C1 nomenclature first. Let's get started. Okay, so let's say we enter a formula here. Gross profit percent is profit in I2 divided by revenue in F2. And we copy that formula down. You ever think about what happens when you copy that formula down? It's really kind of miraculous. They change the formula in every single cell. The I2 changes to I6. The G2 changes to G6. I mean, it's really kind of amazing how fast Excel goes through and rewrites those formulas. In fact, if we take a look at Show Formulas mode, we can do that back here under Formulas and say Show Formulas. We can see that in columns G, H, I, and J that they're actually rewriting these formulas in every single row. Kind of wild, isn't it? Well, it's miraculous, let's say. Okay, well, these formulas, as I discussed in the last lesson, lesson 34, are something called A1 style formulas. They were invented by Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankston when they were creating VisiCalc, used by Mitch Kapoor when he went to Lotus, but Microsoft had developed a different way of referring to cells. They weren't using A1 style, they were using something called R1C1. And amazingly, it's still in there. If we would go up to the Office button and then use Excel Options, and on the Formulas tab, there's a setting that says, hey, go ahead and use the R1C1 reference style. So we'll click OK. And first thing you'll notice is that instead of columns A, B, C, D, E, we have columns 3, 4, 5, 6. And this column here, which was J6 in A1 style, is now called R6C10. Looks very confusing, doesn't it? Okay, well, here's the amazing thing. I'm going to go into Show Formulas mode in R1C1 style. And miraculously, you'll see that the formula, although it looks very confusing, is exactly the same all the way down. So this R1C1 style formulas doesn't have to be changed as we go down a row and another row and another row. It's the same formula the whole way down. Pretty wild that this method actually produces easier formulas. And so it turns out that it's really not miraculous at all. When we double-click the fill handle and copy that formula down 1,000 rows, Microsoft secretly thinks in R1C1 style. They just copy this R1C1 formula down all the way. It's the actual interface is what's showing us the A1 style. I mean, it's almost like, oh, you guys can't figure out R1C1, so all right, we'll reluctantly show you the A1 style. But behind the scenes, Microsoft is thinking in the R1C1 style. So let me take a couple of minutes here and show you exactly how R1C1 works. I'm going to come here to a second worksheet. And I'm interested in this cell here, column D, D7, which in Microsoft's term is called R7C4. Well, every reference in R1C1 style contains the letters R and C. And so if you would just do equal RC, you're actually referring to the exact same cell that you're in. So in the yellow cell, to refer to itself, which I realize is a circular reference, we would just say RC. Now, rarely do we ever create a circular reference pointing back to its own self. So from the yellow cell, if we wanted to refer to this cell, which is one column to the left, we say equal R, and we don't put anything after the R. That says stay in the same row that the formula's in. And then we put a C, but we want to modify the C. In square brackets, we say that we want to go minus one cell. So that points one cell to the left. Now I've set all these up with a text format so I can enter the formulas without having them be evaluated as formulas. If we would want to go to 3 cells to the left, equal RC, and then minus 3 to say that we are moving left 3 cells. Now if we would need to point to the right, well, how do we do that? That's equal RC, and then in square brackets the number 1. All right. What if we don't need to point to any other column? We just want to point to the number right above us. So from the yellow cell, we want to point up here to row 6. we say equal R, and we're going to modify the R. So this is R minus 1 column, or equal R positive 1 column will be the cell just below it. And then, a whole bunch of other varieties. For example, if we wanted to refer to this cell, which was 1 cell to the left and 2 cells up, equal R minus 2 C minus 1. All right, simple enough. So that's the basic way that a relative R1C1 style formula works. Now, in A1 style, we have other kinds of references other than relative references. We have mixed references, we have absolute references. So let's go back to A1 style here for a second. Come to formulas and turn off R1C1, and everything comes back to the way that we know it. Sales tax is revenue in G2 equal G2 times the tax rate up in N1. Now that formula will work in the first cell, but it doesn't work in the other cells. Why? Because, well, the revenue in G2 moves to G6, but the sales tax in N1 moved to N5. That's a bad thing. We wanted it to stay pointing at N1. So what do we do right here to make sure that that formula always stays pointing at N1? We press the F4 key. That puts $N, $1, and that formula is a formula that we can copy. We'll copy it down, and it works all the way. So here we are allowed to change G2 to G6, but the N1 keeps pointing at N1. Let's look at how that happens in R1C1 style. Excel options, formulas, turn on R1C1 style, and click OK, and we'll take a look at this formula. What they're saying is, okay, RC minus 4, so we stay in this row, but go 4 columns to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's grabbing the revenue number, times, and notice there's no square brackets here. We hard code R1C14 to always refer to this cell. Sometimes you might have a mixed reference with only a $sign before the column. That means that the column would not have the square brackets, but the R might have the square brackets. So, this is how R1C1 style formulas work. All right, so a couple of things. When I was working in lesson 34, I would often create the formula in regular Excel and then go and see what the formula looked like in the formula bar. Well, I'm really not advocating that you switch over to R1C1. It's just confusing, right? I mean, we're so used to this is column K, and when it has an 11 up there, you can't even figure out what the 11 means. It's just a very confusing style. What I'm suggesting that you do is you build your formula in Excel, choose that cell that has the formula, we'll go over to Visual Basic, and down in the immediate pane, remember press Control G to get to the immediate pane, we can say print active cell dot formula and see what the A1 style formula is, or we can say print active cell dot formula R1C1, and it will show us the R1C1 style formula. So you don't even have to get to the point where you can write these from scratch. Just put a regular A1 style formula in the worksheet and then come here to the immediate pane, and it'll show you exactly what that R1C1 style formula is. All right, so let's insert a module here. Let's say that we get this data from our IT department over through column F, and we want to build columns G through K. Columns G through K. So here's what we do to build that. Sub, add formulas. Final row equals cells, rows.count, comma 1.end, XL up dot row. And row count, or let's call it data count, is equal to final row minus 1, because our formulas all start in row 2. All right, we're going to add the headings in. So we say range G1 to M1 dot value equals. Now, because we have several different items, we're going to use a new keyword called array. And in that array, I'm going to put each individual heading separated by a comma. So revenue, cost of goods sold, profit, GP percent, nothing, and then, I'm sorry, GB percent, sales tax, nothing, the tax rate in M1, and in fact, I'm going to add one more column and put in the 0.065%. Okay. Now you have to make sure the number of entries here matches the number of entries that you're referring to. So we want G1 through N1. All right, and that'll put our headings in. And then to add the formulas, it's going to be relatively straightforward. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say range G2 dot resize data count, comma 1 dot formula R1 C1 is equal to, and I'm just going to leave it as double quotes right now. We'll come back and figure these out in a little bit. So we have H, I, J, K. Good. G2, H, I, J, K. You know, and the beautiful thing here, because the formula is exactly the same all the way down, we don't have to enter the formula and then copy it. Enter the formula and copy it. We're just going to enter the formula in the whole range very, very quickly. All right, so we have our sample formulas here. I'm in G, and we'll come back and say, all right, what is the formula here? And I'll copy that formula, Control C. Because there are no quotes in the formula, I can just paste it right there inside of my quotes. Switch back to Excel, go to column H, and I'll ask for the active cell.formula. Copy that formula with Control C and paste. And then we go to I2, ask for the active cell.formula, and paste. And then we come to J2, ask for the active cell.formula, copy that and paste. And then we come to K2, again ask for the active cell.formula R1C1, copy that and paste. All right, and there we have it, a perfect little macro that's going to format this report every single day. Here's the test. We'll go back to how we started, the data that we received from our IT department. We don't have to be in A1. We can just run the macro. So we'll do macros, add formulas, click run, and presto, everything appears. It appears all the way down to the end of our data. So just a really, really fast way to enter formulas using the R1C1 style. The advantage again is that you don't have to enter it once and then copy it. You can just simply resize that cell down to how many rows you have, enter the formula. Don't worry necessarily about understanding these. You just have to enter the formula as an A1 style formula. Down here in the immediate pane, figure out what the formula R1C1 is and paste it into your code, and you're good to go. I realize a lot of people despise R1C1. They hate that the macro recorder uses R1C1. For a couple of years while I started recording code, I got rid of every R1C1 formula. And then finally one day I said, well, let me try and understand this. And you know, I realized, oh wait, this is really a much better way to go than A1 style. Started using it, and at this point I can come here and I can either use this method where I create the formula, or most of the time I can just knock these formulas out. I'm that comfortable with them. But certainly it's fine to use the immediate window and build a model formula and then figure out what that formula is and just bring it over here into Excel. R1C1 style formulas, try them out. Great time saver, allows you to streamline your code. I hope you found this lesson helpful. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about when we need to do a calculation in VBA that uses a function in Excel, like VLOOKUP. How can we do that? We'll see that in lesson 36. Thanks for watching.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than live lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.